Hi, everyone, and welcome to Tools for the Creative Life. I'm Ali Sharp, an Outreach Director for the RiNo Arts District, and we are excited to present tonight's panel and this series for creatives in partnership with the Denver Public Library, Colorado Business Committee for the Arts, CBCA, Transforming Creatives, and the Creative Integration Initiative. Tonight's panel is focused on adaptation, where we will talk to three members from Denver's arts community exploring how artists and arts organizations adapted and evolved in a changing world. So before we get started, we'd first like to recognize that we live, work, and create on land that is the traditional territory of the Ute, Cheyenne, and Arapaho peoples, and would like to intentionally recognize the 48 contemporary tribal nations that are historically tied to the lands that make up the state of Colorado. We honor elders past, present, and future, and all those who have stewarded this land through generations, recognizing that government, academic, and cultural institutions were founded upon and continue to enact exclusions and erasures of Indigenous peoples. We also recognize that much of our nation was built by the hands and on the backs of enslaved Africans and Indigenous peoples. We stand in awe of their resilience and creativity, and we express gratitude for and celebrate their past and ongoing contributions. We strive to never take for granted the privilege and complexity of living, working, and creating on this land, and intentionally honor Black, Indigenous, and communities of color in our city. We commit to cultural equity and strive to make this a safe and welcoming space where healing can occur, truths can be told, hidden stories unearthed, and legacies of oppression and inequity continually dismantled. We are dedicated to presenting this event inclusively, so we do encourage you to update your name to include your pronouns if you so desire. So before we get started, I'm just going to let each of our partners here do a quick intro, and then we will turn it over to our moderator to introduce our speakers. So with that, I'll turn it over to Jen with the Denver Public Library.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here today. Like Ali said, I'm Jen Dewey. I'm with Denver Public Library. I'm an adult programming librarian. And here at the library, our mission is to create welcoming spaces where all are free to explore and connect. And I am so grateful to be doing that here with you and this excellent panel and the Tools for the Creative Life team. I wanted to let everyone know that all Denver Public Library locations, except for the downtown Central Library, are open. So please come visit us, come browse, come check stuff out, and say hello, because we have missed seeing everybody. We're still doing online programming, but we're slowly going to start transitioning to some in-person gatherings very soon, which we are super excited about. So check that out on denverlibrary.org. I wanted to let everyone know we are recording, and we're going to post this on our Denver Library YouTube channel, but we will not catch any guests' faces or things like that. So your privacy will be honored. Thank you again for having us be part of it. And I think I am turning it over to Meredith with CBCA.
Thanks, Jen. I know my neighborhood library recently opened, and it was so wonderful to go inside and say hello. So we're glad you guys are back. Hi, everyone. I'm Meredith Badler. I'm the Deputy Director at the CBCA, the Colorado Business Committee for the Arts. Our mission is about advancing Colorado's creative economy through the intersection of arts and business and arts. And that's a lot of what we get to talk about on these wonderful Tools for the Creative Life panels and workshops. We do a number of things at CBCA: advocacy, research, leadership development, arts engagement, but we have a whole bunch of programs, many of which in collaboration like this, about professional development and business skills and supporting artists and creative entrepreneurs. So I'll drop some links in the chat about some of the things we have going on, but just really excited for today's conversation. And I'll kick it over to Leah.
Thanks so much, Meredith. I am so happy to be here today. As Meredith said, my name is Leah. I'm an opera singer and a freelance creative producer who has the pleasure of working with one of today's speakers, and a community manager here at Transforming Creatives, which is a nonprofit organization operating in Denver that invests in the health of creatives through a variety of professional and personal development resources that allow creatives and artists to go forth and invest in the health of society. Part of our work includes operating a creative workspace in the RiNo Arts District, where I am situated right now. And that is home to filmmakers, photographers, visual artists, designers, nonprofits, and other super creative humans. Today's event is just one of the ways that we're helping to serve amazing creatives in our community. And we often work with fantastic partners like those we have here today. And some of those include the amazing people like Steph McDaniel, who it is my pleasure to introduce, who will be leading us through today. Steph is the founder and curator of the Creative Integration Initiative, which offers creative entrepreneurship coaching, fine art curation, workshops, and lectures that act as a beacon for creative vitality. Utilizing a creativity-centered approach to coaching that is both individualized and collaborative, Steph positions creatives and their businesses to thrive. Steph also enjoys making art themselves and spending time with their kids. They're passionate about increasing the sustainability of the arts ecosystem in Denver, their hometown, and are committed to doing this work through ongoing research, business development support, and investment in the creative community. So with that, welcome Steph, and take it away.
Thank you, Leah. When selecting panelists for today's discussion, we really prioritized, the word adaptation, but thinking more about the health of creatives and thinking about people who are prioritizing creative production from an access, equity, and just a creative approach. And so these are really three outstanding curators, musicians, and creative producers that I'm so excited to have in our discussion today. I'll start by introducing Courtney Ozaki of the Japanese Arts Network. Courtney is a creative producer and creative herself who has started this amazing network as the founder and director that offers national resources to Japanese and Japanese American artists, as well as having a production aspect that centers and gives voice to and creative support to Japanese and Japanese American artists. And the Japanese Arts Network is also based in Denver, Colorado. So we're so excited to have you. I'll also introduce Joseph Lamar, musician and creative extraordinaire. Joseph walks and lives and breathes creativity and has even produced one of 303 magazine's voted top albums of the year for 2020 in the middle of a pandemic. Joseph is currently based in Denver, Colorado, grew up in Colorado Springs, and has also lived in New York City, and is very multidisciplinary in his approach to producing music videos and also visual immersive experiences, very performative experiences. And then I will move, so really excited to have you here today as well, Joseph. We'll move on to Cortney Stell, Chief Curator and Executive Director. Hi, Courtney, of Black Cube. If you have not heard of Black Cube, you should definitely take the time to take a deeper dive. This is a nomadic experimental art museum headquartered in Denver, Colorado. And right now, Courtney is joining us from New York City with one of the current fellows. There's an artist fellowship program and just launched a exhibition across New York City, a decentralized exhibition in New York City, and has produced incredible content through the artist fellowship program throughout the pandemic and for several years prior. Courtney is a very accomplished curator herself in many rights, doing many things such as collaborating with Redline to produce resident exhibitions, and travels all over the world, even to the Venice Biennale for approved satellite shows. So Courtney, we're so excited to have you in this discussion and for your role in arts advocacy and advocacy of creatives. And thank you for taking the time to join us here today. Without further ado, we will begin our discussion about adaptation and creatives, and really just wanting to contextualize this in the past year plus that we have all been really experiencing together at the onset of the kind of shutdown orders, and then shortly after, as we had kind of a political movement to really prioritize racial justice, and then in the midst of political polarization happening. And so really kind of centering our conversation on the events of the past year plus. Now people are vaccinated, things are starting to open back up again. I'm really curious if one of you just more generally would like to speak to how you or your organization initially pivoted at the beginning of COVID to kind of adapt to that, and how you saw creatives around you kind of adapting as well.
I'm happy to speak up about what Black Cube has done. Hopefully my internet connection is still stable. The hotel does not have a wireless password, so we'll see how this goes. Black Cube, I think the biggest thing that we did to pivot in regards to the pandemic and the events as of the past year and a half is to really pivot funds towards funding artists. Being an artist in general or a creative is a rather unstable career. Even if you're a blue chip artist, there may be times when you know, feast and times for famine. So especially at a moment when in the visual arts exhibitions were closed all across the world, many art sales went down initially, although they ended up going up the more time people spent in their house. We ended up doing 2 awards for artists to just put cash in their pockets. So that was a big thing that we did. And we also just try to advocate for supporting artists and also acknowledging their role in society. And then through my role as a commissioner for the city of Denver, I was reviewing CARE Act's grants. So that was funding that not only went to individuals, but also to creative businesses in town. And I think the cool thing about doing that is I tend to have a tunnel vision with contemporary art. And it really broadened my horizons to understand, you know, Joseph, maybe you can speak to this a lot more, how many musicians are struggling, from the piano teacher to the professional musician. It was pretty crazy to experience.
Yeah, I really like how you spoke to that, Courtney. And I would like to just hear a little bit more. I know that you launched through Black Cube a microgranting program for alumni during this period. Did you feel like that was specifically important for the time as well? And how did that play into your decision to grant continuously artists you had worked with in the past through the fellowship program?
Sure. So our main program is an artist fellowship. So it's an 18-month program where we fund a site-specific artwork anywhere in the world. And my approach to curating is really centered on the idea of caretaking, what the word actually means. And so part of that is developing long-lasting relationships with artists. And the alumni program, I used to curate an additional project for an artist or help support them in some way. And we decided it was more important, just like the awards, to put money directly in their pockets. So we funded an artist move to a new studio, artist build out for a new studio, and a few other different things. I don't want to take up too much time. I can speak about my programs until I'm blue in the face. So if you guys have questions.
Sorry, Steph, did you want us to respond to that question as well?
Sure, I would love that. Thank you.
Okay, great. Well, my organization's a little bit different. We're pretty young. We started about 2 years ago, and we were really centered on community building and bringing people together. So as you can imagine, we had to do quite a big shift during this forced paradigm shift. And so we were able to redirect our energy to work with other types of producers and artists of color, community organizations, local city and government funders, small businesses, and then individuals through a crowdfunding initiative to fund a 3-month immersive production which we developed in understanding some of the more immediate needs of both the artists in our community who we wanted to provide opportunities for them to have work, as well as for the community at large, in recognizing that sort of deeper empathy was needed and for cultural understanding. And so what we did was we created this immersive theater production called Zotto that was rooted in stories of supernatural beings from Japanese folklore. But it was a driving tour. So if you were located in Denver, you could actually drive to the locations as the story unfolded. And then if you were outside of Denver, you could still participate in an online platform. But we were able to share stories and historical context from Denver history that paralleled present day issues of systemic racism and internalized racial biases that maybe were the more sordid stories that people hadn't heard of before, in a time where there was heightened tension and people really needed to have that understanding of one another. And then we were also able to provide work for underemployed creatives by helping them to sort of pivot understanding their other sort of talents. So we provided voice acting opportunities, production, artwork, opportunities for artists who are typically, visual artists. And we even produced a short dance film for different artists of color, and to engage a filmmaker who's Japanese American. And so we had about 99% of our artists were, from the artist BIPOC community. And we were also able to sort of, I guess, lift the community spirits by sharing a safe opportunity for them to engage and learn outside of their computer screens if they lived in Denver. So actually providing them with COVID safe opportunities to participate. So I think that was really what we were trying to accomplish. And I think we were able to achieve that with this sort of amalgam of small wins. It helped me understand how we might move forward with resilience despite challenges faced, and then also work together within this sort of ecosystem of support, between artists, stakeholders, and art consumers or people who, community members.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Courtney.
Yeah, one of the things that I really leaned into during this past year was just resourcefulness and resilience. That was kind of the name of the game for me. It was definitely a curveball for all of us. And I planned the release of my music and the promotion of it around, there not being a global pandemic. So when there was one, it kind of changed my plans. But there were ways in which I was able to use that in a way that was beneficial to me. Spending more time at home in the beginning, gave me an opportunity to kind of be more intentional about the music itself. Whereas I was pretty sure that it was finished before, but having time to kind of zoom in on things, I got to be more intentional and more nitpicky about certain sounds and things like that. So it just ended up being something I felt better about when it was finally time to release it. And as well as it gave me, an opportunity to just kind of prioritize. It sort of gave me, and I'm sure a lot of people can identify with it, when something like that happens, it kind of makes you aware of what your priorities are, what's important to you, whether that's socially or politically or emotionally or relationships or artistically, you just kind of have a clearer sort of compass. So that's kind of what happened for me.
I loved hearing kind of the resilience and the outcomes and the creativity, but I know that there were a lot of moments where we were all confused or scared, not sure what was going on. Maybe there was moments of feeling like creativity was suppressed. Can you speak to a moment of challenge or a moment of something that you had to work past to get to that final creative outcome, or something that you're really looking forward to leaving behind about that experience?
Yeah, I mean, in the beginning, I took a huge pay cut, and that sort of took the wind out of myself, because I was thinking, how am I going to pay for, well, I was going to say my music first, but maybe like rent and stuff like that first. And then, how am I going to promote this music? Because I planned on promoting everything out of my pocket. And I had a view of things that was very kind of linear and like dependent on, systems that are in place, like as they are. So like you work a job, you have money, and then you spend the money on things that you need, as opposed to like bartering or, other ways of getting income or ways to do things without necessarily spending money. So it was challenging at first, because I had to sort of unlearn that way of thinking, that I need to necessarily have money to do things, or that money only comes from a day job. And when I kind of opened up my world to other possibilities, there were grants I was able to apply for, and some that I received, and just things like that, performing, like doing live streams and stuff like that, and crowdsourcing stuff, Venmo, PayPal. It makes it possible to do art in a way that I'm not waiting for anyone, or I'm not waiting for someone's cosign, or for some gatekeeper to say you can, or to give me the money to do the things that I want to do. I can just like do it. So yeah, that just became clearer to me, but it's definitely difficult in the beginning.
I think that's a really important point, the diversification of the field and streams of income that we have seen creatives sort of pivot and adapt to. I think that's really important to acknowledge, and I think something that's here long lasting. Artists finding, I think that on average, a creative person should have 5 sources of income, and at least 3 of those should not be related to their labor. They're like physical labor. So ideally you have some sort of passive income, whether it's an album that's generating some income, or addition to prints that's generating income, or real estate, or, all of these other things. I would like to see artists get together and buy property and have some investment. So I think that aspect of challenge forces, especially individuals, because it's the big institutions that move like oil tankers, right? Like they like pivot like, and it's like the little artists or the small organizations like Courtney and Courtney over here, like you can pivot fast. And I think that's cool, because we could get ahead of times. I definitely abide to like these accelerationist theories. I think that our society is only getting faster right now, and that it's these old institutions that can't pivot with the times. Like look at, the Whitney, how they responded to BLM, and, all these big institutions that just seem to want to perform empathy, but don't really have the structure to sort of act in the way that the population is shifting. So I think, I don't know, I really resonate, Joseph, with a lot that you said from the organizational perspective, kind of looking at artists and creatives.
Yeah, I think too, helping organizations who maybe hadn't traditionally supported this type of work to understand the benefit in supporting this type of work, especially through the pandemic, and through sort of like being afraid of like what I call cultural extinction, with for the Japanese community, for example, it's just that there aren't as many younger generation people who are coming to the table to carry forward, and maybe they have resources and opportunities, but they don't know what the next step is. So I agree with you, Courtney, about the sort of behemoth institutions. That's really challenging. But I think like also thinking about your work as being applicable to in more organic ways to other areas of support as well. So I think that was something that I'm still continuing to try to do as a small organization, trying to see what are the connections and where's the intersectionality between the art that the artists I'm trying to support or the things I'm trying to produce, cross paths with other sort of opportunities like that.
Courtney, you spoke to it earlier about, or Courtney Stell, sorry, about the kind of, I know that Black Cube structure is very much based and designed on efficiency, and being nomadic is an efficiency, but also artists' income streams and their adaptiveness, and how artists, even blue chip artists, may have periods of great flux depending on when pieces sell. Can you each kind of, if anyone kind of sparks to this notion of the biggest takeaways for artists and the biggest ways that artists already are positioned to be very adaptable, just by the very structure of, I guess creatives at large, I apologize, the kind of the creative economy at large, as those individual cultural producers are structured in a way that they always need to be adaptive in terms of income, collaborations, opportunities, exhibitions start and end, albums get produced and released. There's all these kind of cyclical flows, the ebb and flow. So what are the takeaways from this period for creatives?
I guess I feel like the ivory tower of the institution is sort of a little bit more not transparent. It's maybe more hollow. It's the public, it's kind of like the emperor's new clothes kind of situation. I think a lot of folks see through institutions a little bit more clearly and are starting to question board structures, artist compensation, things like that. I definitely always speak from the institutional perspective because I run a nonprofit. So I think I'm often thinking out of that space. That's kind of my agenda. But, I'm seeing changes, for example, nonprofit compensation for artist fees. Like it's really uncommon in the contemporary art field to pay artists while institutions make money off of their programs. And so I think we're seeing more and more artists be empowered with things that they need, with organizing with other artists. There's nonprofits like Wage working for artists in the greater economy that are really advocating for fair compensation and providing compensation structures based on the operating budget of organizations. So I think that's one really important takeaway, is that I think folks are more empowered to ask for pay, more empowered to see the institution as a human, right? If a business has all the rights as a human, then you should be able to question a business just like a human. Yeah, so Courtney, Joseph, thoughts?
I think artists are more open to leaning on each other too. Just at the grassroots level, like with Zotto, we reached out to our friends at the Black Actors Guild because we knew we needed some talent for our main voice actors. So we ended up having Quinn Marchman, who's one of the founders of Black Actors Guild, be our main character. And then we also worked with Joey Ha from Core to help us do a lot of the research about sort of the historical inequities within Denver history, to find those ghost stories that we could share through this narration. And so I think it's really, people are looking outside of their silos to try to support one another a bit more. So outside of institutions as well. Oh, sorry.
Who's that?
This is Kaya. Sorry, she's a habit of sticking her butt in the video camera.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things is, it's given us, I think as creatives, some more like grit, just in terms of like our ability to withstand, crazy circumstances around us, but also like I've seen a lot of people moving forward in major ways over the past like year and a half. So we just really kind of like internalized what was going on, like using it as fuel. And I think the other part of it is, I shouldn't say not planning, because planning is still important, but like taking into account that there are things that aren't in your control, so that you are the sort of like driving force that propels you forward, or waits when it's time to wait, or goes sideways or backwards or whatever direction you need to go into. But that, it's just sort of like a centeredness, and an intentionality in what you're doing, with the recognition that like you can't control everything around you. There are some things that are just going to happen, but what you do is the difference between something succeeding or not succeeding.
I would be curious to hear more about what the role of the artist has been during this period, and what the role of some of your projects have been. This is an invitation to either talk about, Cortney Stell. I know that Black Cube produced projections on the clock tower that were accessible from simply being outside and distanced publicly. Joseph, you mentioned briefly having the opportunity to do live stream concerts as well. And I know that we've all been also speaking about, and then Courtney Ozaki, you also mentioned Zotto, but I know you did a number of other things during this time, as well as working with the Colorado Health nonprofit, and like doing performances in all sorts of different arenas, the music video. And so, what is the artist's role in this time? What is the creative's role, and what has the impact been in a moment of kind of cultural shift, especially with the Black Lives Matter movement, and just also people kind of spirits being down, and there being a lot of uncertainty whether a family member had gotten ill, or whether we were all missing, getting to see each other in person. How are creatives impacting society and have been during that time?
Well, I guess I don't think the artists with a capital A have a role. I think that it used to bother me when I taught professional practices and everyone had to write an artist statement and everyone had to put their CV together, and they had to become this sort of mechanical robot that fits into this sort of one space. And I think the strongest art that I've seen, that I've had personal experiences with, helps me digest the world, helps me think of the world differently, or helps me think of the world through someone else's eyes. And I think it's really hard when you go through a global pandemic that hit, so many individuals in so many different ways. Like there was huge socioeconomic divides, right? Like New York City, where I'm at, it was like a fleeing of all the rich people went to like Vail and Aspen and all those places, where it was, very different for women and ethnic minorities and immigrants and all those sort of folks. And artists fit within all those categories, right? There's billionaire artists, and there's, artists that are experiencing homelessness. So I think it's hard to put them in one box. But something that I think the most powerful experience I've had with art during the pandemic has not been the projects I've produced. If you guys can go to our website and look at all the things we've done, but it's really been the memorials and the murals and the banners and the public communication around BLM. Like a lot of that stuff, especially in Denver, actually, I'm not going to say especially anywhere. That was really something that was not about being an artist with a capital A. It was about using creativity to connect with society. And I feel like that is so much of what we were missing in the pandemic, because in our society at large, we've been more individualized, right? We've been more isolated on social media. And then with the pandemic, we are even further isolated. And I think we're really hungry for being together, for uniting around things. And yeah, so the most moving things I've seen were there.
Yeah, I agree with that. Whether it was on a larger scale or a smaller scale, right? So I think people just wanted to be together, even if they aren't, didn't know each other, right? I think one of the most fun, immersive programs I took part in was Pie Hole from the Under the Radar festival. They did a show called, I have to remember what it was called, but it was called, I wrote it down somewhere, but in any case, it was, you know, a piece of art where they were all on Zoom, and they cultivated sort of this story about, oh, here it is. It was called Disclaimer. So there's a main character who starts off and she's preparing Persian food for everyone and showing you what she's doing, but then it slowly, gradually turns into this sort of Agatha Christie-like murder mystery where everybody in the room is a suspect. And so people are starting to be engaged as characters in her family. It's also addressing sort of tropes, and it's like a commentary on tropes and stereotypes. And so it's doing that really, really subtly, but not, if that makes sense. So it's getting people thinking, it's getting people interacting with each other, people that you probably haven't ever met from across the country. And then also feeling like you're part of her family while going through this murder mystery. So I really enjoyed that in particular because it was a really creative use of Zoom that I'd never seen before. Really artistically, they used a lot of creative techniques and filters and things too to make it feel like a noir theater piece. But yeah, just being able to do something together, right? So that was, but on the other hand, I think like the emphasis on care and self-care and mental health was really important. We tried to provide some things through this Denver Arts and Venues and McNichols Building Initiative, some different types of workshops, sort of during the height of the tension, centering the importance of self-care and recognizing it was called kintsugi because it was recognizing sort of the broken pieces and how there's beauty in self-repair, but you can still see the cracks. So kintsugi is like the Japanese art of repair. It's the, I don't know if you've ever seen the pottery where they put the gold in the cracks and they make it something that already exists beautiful again. But we did some workshops, brought in like a dancer, choreographer from San Francisco who did like movement-based story sharing and finding your care practice. And then we did some other things like brought in a karate sensei to talk about his journey, and then taught people how to do a kata, you know, stuff like that. So I think that was how we were trying to provide something for people to really take care of themselves, because especially people who are really being asked to do the work, they need something they need a reminder to like be compassionate towards themselves.
Cool. Yeah, I think that Courtney Ozaki and Courtney Stell both gave really good answers. Not a whole lot I would add. The only thing I would say is just, you know, as far as like the role of creatives, I think it's something that's, I mean, in some ways it's always changing, But in other ways, it's just something that's just like a pillar that's there in, you know, our lives, no matter what's going on. You know, people tend to look for entertainment or to seek refuge in, or to seek some sense of like humanity or like connection in the arts, you know, and I think that over this past year, you know, that kind of did give people a sense of connectiveness when we were physically separated. And, you know, yeah, it'll continue to do whatever we need it to do. You know, there are instances where the arts have been, you know, part of the sort of like lifeblood of social movements, and that's valid and beautiful. There's also art that, like, you know, there's something going on socially and maybe it's not directly talking about that, or maybe it doesn't mention that at all, and that's valid too. There's contrarian art, and it's valid too. So, you know, I guess it depends on the artist. You know, I think as long as we're like expressing ourselves authentically, it'll be useful to somebody other than ourselves.
Joseph, was your musical and creative practice something that was a part of your self-care and resilience during the time of the pandemic?
Yeah, in some ways, definitely writing was very therapeutic. Like I started writing a lot of songs during that period, and that was very therapeutic for me. And you know, recording and you know, I had moments of like visual art, like moments of painting and stuff like that. And yeah, all of those things were really helpful in like kind of putting the things I was feeling somewhere.
You spoke earlier of the feeling of a compass and clarity, and I almost felt like for me, jumping into something that could be anything, it doesn't matter the outcome, even when I wasn't feeling creative, like just dashing down a poem or something was almost a compass. And so I think you spoke about that really beautifully. And, you know, we're not exactly out yet. There's going to be some long-term major implications financially, socially, emotionally, in terms of our personal and community health for artists, institutions even. We're even seeing that at the monolith scale. So I would love to hear just a couple quick, if people want to interject, resources. We'll compile some of these later. But, you know, Cortney Stell, you mentioned Wage for Work, and we'll put that in there. I know that Black Cube was the first Wage for Work institution that was certified from its inception, but that's also just, yeah, pretty incredible. But, you know, also for, you know, creatives who may be working with institutions who don't operate with those equitable standard payment minimums, for artists to go and say, actually, I do need to get paid for this activity or for my time in this way. So are there resources that, or even personal care routines that you'd like to share quickly before we open it up for question and answer?
Well, I think wage is the biggest one. So I'm going to drop the link to the fee calculator here in the chat for everyone. So basically, if you're a nonprofit, you know, in the music industry, you know, in any industry, you have to report your taxes, right? And taxes are available to the general public, or you can see a 990. And you get the operating budget from the organization. Sometimes you can even get director salaries, interesting information. But there's a website called GuideStar. I actually think it was just purchased, but you can kind of Google it, GuideStar. You can get access and you can look up organizations, 990s, and you can see their operating budget. And you can get a sense of what they operate at, right? So Black Cube's around $400,000 a year. And then this fee calculator moves the calculator based on the operating budget of the organization, and it recommends bare minimum pay for a performance, for a solo exhibition, group exhibition, for writing, for all kinds of different things. So I think that's like a really big tool, GuideStar and Wage for Work, to empower people to sort of ask for funding, ask for compensation. And I think the other thing to that I would just, is not really a tool. It's more for artists to just get comfortable with simple agreements, to have, it doesn't have to be anything complicated with a ton of legalese, but there's a long history of not having agreements down in writing. And when artists lend objects or all kinds of things. Oh, thank you, Lori. She put Guide Star in the chat as well. I don't know, I can keep going, but you guys should feel empowered to be clear about your agreements, be clear about what you're paying for, what the institution is paying for, or the business or whoever, and also be able to ask for compensation, because creative labor is labor. It's the most important labor in the world, and you guys deserve all the respect, and that just starts with money.
Yeah, I mean, I'm thank you for that, Courtney. I'm still figuring out how to help myself and others value their time and I guess like advocate for themselves, trying to continue those conversations. I know the group Ideas is really advocating for equity within theater spaces in Colorado. So they're really great. There are a lot of different organizations who are working towards that right now. I'm having trouble thinking of one specific resource right now, but yeah, I think a lot of different organizations, like all of the organizations here on the call, have supported me in some way in my creative producing, and helped me to, more importantly, help me to support other artists. So I would say any of these organizations are a good start to keep an eye out for resources, grants, and opportunities that they provide. Yeah, I think those are the main things I can think of at the moment. And GuideStar is great. I'm actually, it's harder for me sometimes because I'm not a 501c3, but I think I was able to, fortunately, through pandemic with this specific Zotto production and my sort of collaboration with Joey Ha in creating an organization called Stories for Solidarity, or Stories of Solidarity. We were able to work with Warm Cookies of the Revolution to be our fiscal sponsor. So that's also an option if you're, and Black Cube. Yeah.
No, we're not one, but that is such an amazing tip for everyone here.
Yeah. So there are other organizations that would be willing to support you as fiscal sponsor. So it's good to find those relationships if you're not a 501c3. So yeah.
There are also organizations that offer fiscal sponsorship. So like my favorite is Fractured Atlas. So if you guys want, as an artist, want to apply for grants that are available to nonprofits, you can get a nonprofit to support you, to underwrite you. They generally have to look at your financials, or the finances may even have to go through that organization depending upon their agreement. And sometimes they skim off the top. In fact, often they skim a little bit off the top. I think 5%. I definitely would not do more than 5%. And then also CBCA is here. Don't y'all do Colorado Lawyers for the Arts, if I'm not mistaken? I think there's some pro bono legal support in-house. Sorry, Joseph.
Oh, no worries. I was like furiously writing all those things down. So yeah, I guess to the question of like self-care, right? I might not be the most qualified person. Like I say, in my experience, a good thing is focusing on like holistic health. Because I know that sometimes if you are, pursuing something like the arts, maybe better, I'm going to backtrack, maybe like boundaries. So I think that like when you're pursuing something like the arts, something that doesn't really have a sort of like standardized or like linear thing that you follow to get to where you're going, and then plus, you know, where you're going is so like unique to you. There, you know, no one can really tell you how to do it. And so it entails a lot of kind of zigzaggy movement. And in that, sometimes I think we can like concede our boundaries because, you know, you want to succeed, or you want to book this gig, or you want to get paid for this gig. And so it can be easy to start to become a little bit wishy-washy about what you will do, what you won't do. And so I think that a good thing is like practicing boundaries, like just being aware enough of like who you are and what you want, what kind of artist you are, and what kind of art you make, and using that as sort of like the foundation through which you interact with businesses, and through which you interact with like the world at large, through which you interact with like social media, you know, having like clear boundaries. And I guess, yeah, I think that's, I feel okay with that, leaving it at that.
Absolutely. All such good points and resources. And I would simply point to my favorite podcast of 2020, which is performance artist and advocate Trisha Hersey put on a beautiful podcast, and we'll send all of these resources later out to all of the registrants. So no problem with anyone who doesn't have a pen handy or is doing other things right now. You will get a tidy list later with many other things on it too, as we percolate, I'm sure. But it was called Rest is Resilience, and it posits this idea of community care. And the collective imagination. It's just a beautiful interview, beautiful conversation, and worth listening to. The other moment that really stands out was the first in this series for the Tools for the Creative Life, when Chloe Duplessis did a creative visioning session. And so any creatives or any human that is looking to re-up their goals, that is on the YouTube page. And I'm going to do it every 3 months, probably for the rest of my life, just because it has incredible value, and Chloe is incredible to just be in the presence of. So thank you all so much for your thoughts on resources. I would love to take just the last 5 minutes here to see if any audience members or co-facilitators want to add anything into the chat for questions, any burning questions. We've got a little bit of time left, and we'd love to hear your thoughts and your curiosities as well. It's been such a pleasure to be in your presence, Courtney, and Joseph today. We'll wait a few more minutes for just see if any questions come through here, if any of the speakers want to drop in. But after a good chunk of time of being apart, it's great to at least virtually be together and see you all and hear your thoughts.
Joseph, you can be an honorary Courtney.
The Courtneys. Conversation with the Courtneys.
At my middle name, Joseph Courtney Lamar.
Well, thank you everyone for joining our conversation today with the Courtneys, and we will send out a resource list. Thanks for all your time, and thank you so much to the panelists.
It was a delight, and always great to support these orgs and to meet amazing new people. Take care, everyone.
Have a good night.
Thank you so much.
Bye.